Chapter 29. Ellie would never know for how long she experienced those visions, someone else's memories of a lifetime long beyond imagining. They began with a childhood, from her own realm. They were of a boy who lived with his mother in a simple thatched hut, huddling close to the fire each night in a small village. It was many hundreds of years in the past, and they had a simple existence, caring for a few chickens and goats. The boy was not always a welcome member of the village, for he had odd features. His eyes were such an intense blue. He was always skinny and had very lithe limbs, yet had strength and speed that could shock the other boys of the village. They said he was unnatural. They were right, of course, but he could never admit it. He and his mother had a secret, that his father was not of their world. Merlin's father would visit often, at least once a week. He would appear in the corner of their simple hut, a tiny figure that had greenish skin with beautiful wings. He would then magic himself to be human size, or occasionally would magic Merlin and his mother down to the diminutive size of his father. As Merlin got older, his father had taught him of the Ivory Realm, of the fairies and goblins and, less common, the fablins and gories. When Merlin was in his early teens, his mother fell ill. It was a terrible and fast illness, and each day Merlin prayed that his father would visit, for he had a magical ability to heal. Eventually, Merlin's father did visit, just hours too late. Merlin's mother had died of illness, while Merlin also suffered a fever. As the illness had spread to him, his father, having used magic to make himself the size of a human, had been distraught to lose the woman he loved, but had concentrated on saving his son. Returned to health by his father, Merlin had gone to live with his aunt. He was visited often by his father, and they spent more time together. They would spend days in the forests of the Blue Realm, where other humans would not venture. His father attempted to teach Merlin magic. It was difficult at first, but they discovered that Merlin's human blood changed things. He could not seem to do any sort of fairy magic, even though he actually had human teeth, which his father had told him were a powerful enhancer to fairy magic. Goblin magic had not progressed at all at first. Then one day Merlin's father had given him a very rare, goblin-forged amulet. The amulet was small, intended to be worn around the wrist of a goblin, and it didn't look particularly special. But Merlin's father told him it was made of the rarest star rock, fallen to earth in a ball of fire, and forged into an amulet by a legendary mage goblin. Merlin had been keen to hold it, although it had barely fit over his little finger. But when he held it, he seemed able to work goblin magic. His human side even seemed to amplify his goblin magic, so despite being only 1/4 goblin, he was able to learn magic more powerful than most goblins, maybe able to rival the mage goblins. More years passed, and Merlin continued to try to learn the fairy magic that he should also have inherited, at least in part, from his father, but he had no success. However, one day he did do something new, something dangerous and chaotic that nearly killed both Merlin and his father. They had decided that it must be human magic. They were not aware of any human that could do real magic, so Merlin's father surmised that it must have been awakened by his fairy blood. Perhaps even his fairy blood amplified human magic the way human blood seemed to amplify goblin magic. Carefully, slowly, they had experimented together, and found many new ways that Merlin could use his human magic. It was exciting for both of them, as Merlin learned to control the chaos, to direct it with ever more finesse until he could use such artfully fine threads of chaos that he could control the world around him. He even discovered a way to make portals, similar to the ones his father could make, but there was always the innate ability to just unleash chaos as a destructive force. One day, the visits from his father abruptly stopped. Days turned into weeks with no visit. Months went by with no visit, no messages. Merlin could only guess what had happened. Eventually, Merlin had left his aunt's home and began to explore the lands of the Blue Realm. It was a dangerous time for all, with much fighting and war, kingdoms rising and falling quickly. At first Merlin had avoided the conflicts. It was on one of those days, walking along a quiet beach between small fishing villages, that he had felt something. It drew him closer, and he had found the worn skull of a strange creature. It was not a creature he was familiar with, for it had a single long thin horn at the front of its skull. When Merlin touched it, he found that he could draw far more power into himself through that horn than ever before. He took the horn from the skull and kept it close to him from that day on. With his increased power and ever-increasing skill, He became more brazen, less concerned with keeping his magic a secret. He came to the attention of the powerful, in particular, a young King Arthur. Arthur had seemed the best of a bad bunch, a fairer and kinder king than most. Merlin had stayed with Arthur for years, advising him, using his powers to help Arthur build a strong kingdom to protect his people. However, in time Arthur had grown power-hungry with age, had asked more and more of Merlin, increasingly demanding the use of Merlin's most chaotic and destructive powers. The day had come that Merlin had refused, and all too quickly the men he had served and advised for years turned on Merlin, claiming his powers were dark and that he was evil, to kill him. Still young and prone to anger, Merlin had unleashed his powers on Camelot, tearing every brick down before fleeing. He had fled to the Ivory Realm, not even sure how he had managed to make a portal to a place he had never been. He found himself in the midst of another war. His father had mentioned shifting powers among the Goblin clans, with one clan crowning a king and going to war against the other clans. Merlin had been concerned that his father might have got caught up in that war and got himself into trouble. Now Merlin was involved, and it transpired that the Goblin King had unified the Goblin clans and invaded fairy lands. Merlin's time with Arthur had made him sick of war, and he wanted to see an end to it. He decided to use his powers to end the war quickly, decisively, and had aided the fairies to drive the Goblin horde out of their lands. He smashed the Goblin armies and scattered the clans back to their own lands. Betrayed in his own realm, hunted as a witch despite always trying to help, he spent much of his life in the Ivory Realm after that, but he maintained a few friendships in the Blue Realm, even finding a wife and having a son himself. Also, to make life easier for his fairy companions, he set up a simple deal where children would leave their fallen teeth somewhere easy to find, under a pillow or beside a bed, and in exchange the fairies would leave tokens of thanks, usually coins or occasionally lost pieces of jewellery, that the inquisitive fairies could find. It saved the fairies the effort of searching for discarded teeth, and gave the children small treats. The agreement was spread to people by the remnants of the Druids and their friends. Then there was a period of more vague memories, as if Merlin was intentionally keeping things from her. Ellie didn't push for those memories. It was Merlin's life, and he was entitled to secrets. In Merlin's later years, he discovered that his father's parents were still alive and had borne another child, a Fablin girl called Istaga, which meant that Merlin also had a small family in the Ivory Realm, but they were not sure how to treat him and saw him only infrequently. They did not know what had happened to Merlin's father. Finally, there came a prophecy. It was unclear to Ellie from where the prophecy came, but it was clear that Merlin took it very seriously. There would come a time, many years later, when Merlin's help would be needed again, but Merlin would not be there. Instead, the chosen of his bloodline would come, and Merlin had to find a way to prepare him or her. The visions stopped, and Ellie felt as if she had aged years. In a way she had, with over a century of experiences now a retrievable part of her own memory. Within the bright void, Merlin looked down at her, a look of relief engraved on his face. Ellie understood that his part of the prophecy was complete. The weight of responsibility of it had been lifted from his shoulders and placed onto hers. "You know everything you need to know, young Ellie. You are ready," he told her.
"Ready for what?"
she asked, fearful of the answer. A sad look passed across his face, or maybe a guilty one for passing such a burden. "To save the world," he whispered.